Welcome to Crossing the Line, a special 12-part series of KidSketch focusing on the interesting and culturally diverse San Diego-Tijuana region during the region's designation as the World Design Capital 2024. Crossing the Line by KidSketch introduces kids and adults to the benefits of sketching as a way of seeing, understanding, communicating, and appreciating the interesting world all around us. Crossing the Line welcomes a different guest each time, and today we welcome Carlos Hernandez, principal and co-founder of Helio Architecture and Design. The Exchange Pavilion is no ordinary structure. It's been a collaboration between Helio and the Tijuana artist Danielle Ruanova, and designed specifically for the World Design Capital. We are eager to hear Carlos tell us all about the process and the structure. So welcome, Carlos, to Crossing the Line.
Thank you. No, very excited for the opportunity and thank you for the invitation. The pavilion came about through a very rigorous design process that was condensed in a very short period of time. World Design Capital and the City of San Diego put out a bid late 2023 for inviting architects, artists, on both sides of the border to submit to design the pavilion for the World Design Capital. They made us resubmit and requested that we team up with someone across the border. So they wanted a binational team. We've known Danielle Ruanova for some time, obviously a very influential figure in the art scene here, especially with the things that deal with the border. And initially it was a lot about just conversations about our region and trying to identify what makes our region so unique and what are those elements that really stand out to us about the region. Tijuana and San Diego, although they've been side by side for forever, it's more and more now, it seemed like it's being treated as a region, and especially with this cross-border culture, right? That's what was really interesting to us, was that it was the first time that really San Diego was identifying itself as a border town with this region, right? So this dynamic was something that we were very interested in, and we wanted to materialize the sharing of resources, right? We started to make lists of all these things of what makes our region unique. We had like diagrams, words, images that we kind of collaged together to represent the area. And so basically in this process, the word exchange really stood out to us, right? Exchange was really resonated. Even before we had the design, we just felt like it felt right for this pavilion to be called the Exchange Pavilion and be this pavilion that's kind of nomad pavilion. With it being called the Exchange, we felt that it already kind of started to have a very strong brand. And Danielle came up with a font for it. So it's actually a custom font. When it's all filled in, it's like a circle with an X. But you start subtracting from that and it makes the letters. And so we really started to explore like X as kind of also like the crossroads, but also like X marks the spot, right? Like, the World Design Capital, right? So we were really thinking about it also in a way, trying to read and plan as an X. We thought about the border wall, right? The border wall is like this very unique element, like how it dives into the ocean, right? And it's like this, you don't see this anywhere else. And it's incredibly busy border crossing, and there's so much happening there. And so we looked at it and we're like, well, we have these two walls, right? And then there's this no man's land in between, this kind of strip of land that usually the Border Patrol circulates, but we called it the no man's land, basically. And we thought, well, what if we take the border wall and in a way, represent it as kind of the simplified two planes? Because initially, when you look at the border wall, one is concrete, like concrete pillars and some metal. And then the old border wall is like just metal. It's like this corrugated metal, rusted metal. And so what we did is we took those two planes and essentially just kind of, pinched them together, right? So by doing this, creating this space, habitable space in this no man's land, it naturally bends up, right? So the sides open up and it invites you. And so the thought was, yes, what a cool or romantic idea that this no man's land becomes a space for the community, a space for the region, right? A space for both sides to come, to meet, to exchange ideas, exchange experiences. There was a lot of talk from the World Design Capital about human-centered design. So how do we bring in the community, the people? How can they participate in the pavilion? One of the other things that we thought about that was very iconic about the border were the exchange houses, right? So they have the conversion rates, peso to dollar and these things. So we were like, whoa, what a great idea to bring that in, right? And and have this be interactive. So instead of bringing in this ticker tape, but instead of it showing these exchange rates, it's showing poetry from writers and poets on both sides of the border. And obviously the polycarbonate, it was inspired by the corrugated metal that's on the wall. We were trying to find the material that we could use that would sort of represent that, but also cast some shadow or be some shade for people in the plaza, and also have this interesting light quality effect. And it does give you this kind of low tech kind of stained glass effect, you know, like cathedral like effect, because it's got this texture to it, and it makes an interesting pattern on the floor. It was so hard to also bring it all together and also kind of navigate the balance of the budget and also the complexity of, you know, making ticker tape that bends like that, right? Like, we worked with Matt Mangano, our structural engineer, to come up with a structural system that would allow us to span the distance that we want to span and make this shape, but also make it modular, right? That could come apart into frames. So it was very romantic, of the idea of, like, you know, it needed, like our regions, you know, they need each other to exist. You know, we need these frames to meet and for it to become this pavilion, you know. So it comes apart into 8 frames, and it's shipped on these oversized trucks. So that was a whole other thing, right? The logistical aspect of doing something like this, because it's not only architecture and design. Now we got to also figure out how to bring it across the border. So we worked with Miller Transport, you know, oversized trucks. They loaded them on, and piece by piece. So 8 trips with a pilot car across the Otay border, all the way up through to San Diego. They actually had to do a little turn in downtown to get to President's Way, and then in through President's Way up to the Plaza de Panama. And it was just amazing to see the size of this twisted structure that's coming in through Balboa Park, right? And just the juxtaposition of this kind of very historic district, and you see this very almost futuristic looking structure there coming in. And we talked a lot about that we wanted to have this maybe more modern capsule in this beautifully, you know, historical area. It's become, the World Design Capital has become more about just the region and showcasing the, you know, what we have on both sides of the border and how we're stronger together. But that human-centered design aspect was kind of a lot of what was driving, but it also speaks to, you know, the collaboration of both sides. You know, having this massive structure get trucked across the border. Generally, the goal from the beginning and how we pitch it to the World Design Capital is we wanted to create an iconic piece that would be a beacon for our region. But this was our attempt to plant the seeds in our region, right? For future growth, future development, because that's what the World Design Capital is all about. These cities that are about to take a step up and really flourish. So this is our attempt to plant the seeds for our city and our region moving forward.
Carlos, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us all about this fascinating structure and your design process to create it. We're going to sketch the Exchange Pavilion now, and hopefully you'll join us.
Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate the invitation and looking forward to sketching with everyone.
Our building may look a little intimidating, but let's just break it down. It's essentially a rectangle, but in perspective. And perspective is where the portions farther away from us appear smaller. So we start with the rectangular shape, and then we find the horizon line. I'm going to make the top and the bottom of our rectangle angled to indicate the perspective aspects. Notice the top is actually sort of broken into 3 sections. And the bottom, well, it has the 2 flat ends, but also it has that arched opening in the middle of it. It's actually more like eye-shaped opening, isn't it? So we'll add that arch and then that inner lip. And then we're going to add those portions that are behind and the other side of the X. So I've blocked out the overall shapes, and now I'm adding the ribs. Those are the steel pipes or tubes that form the skeleton of the structure, and they really help define that shape and how it warps and how it goes from being straight to curved to back to straight again. Now adding what's in the background helps to locate this pavilion and keep it from just being this object floating in the air. So I'll add some of the buildings, use the trees as background to bring the pavilion forward. And we want to see the museum in the background as well, because it gives us context of where we are. We're in Balboa Park. And this is a space for people. And so we're going to add the people in here. And in our tutorial, we'll talk about how to sketch people. And then, of course, we need to add the color because the color is such a strong element in this design. And it gives the building real pop, but it also helps to show, it helps to define that shape. Let's start our sketch in pencil. I'm going to start with a rectangle, as if just to help guide how I break the building down and into some simpler shapes. I'm going to find a horizon line and then carve away at that rectangle. From a proportion standpoint, it looks like the width of the building is about twice the height. So we'll make a rectangle. If you want to, you can make a square, because we always know it's easier to see a square in proportion and then just make two of them. And so there's our rectangle. Go up about a quarter and make a horizontal line, and that's that ground plane line. It's a horizon line, though we can't see the horizon where the sky and the ground meet. Here on this side is the wide end, which is where Carlos was calling it the ticker tape, where the words go through. Find about the halfway point. Let's make it, well, we have the halfway point if you made two squares. So I'm going to make an angled line down at the bottom. I'm going to go about halfway in our rectangle, about halfway up to the horizon line, about like that. And then above it, I'm going to make another diagonal line. This one I'm going to go about halfway between the top of my rectangle and the horizon line. And that's just to help get the proportions going. Now let's start to break it apart. You see that the top of this structure, it's like broken into three sections. So I'm going to make on the right-hand side about a third in, make it slope like that. Looks like it goes level for about a third, and then it goes up ever so slightly. You see how that works? Okay. So we're keeping it loose at this point, keeping the lines flowing, blocking it out. All right, now let's try this little archy thing. So the highest point of the arch is about halfway between. If we were really looking straight on, this is asymmetrically positioned on the building. That is, it's closer to the right-hand side. Let's just sketch what we're seeing here. So our highest point is going to be about halfway in between. It's going to be just a little bit down from the top. If you want to do the one side first, make an arc like that to the right of center. And the other side, it's sort of a swoopy arc. It's not, it's a little curvy, kind of like that. And then just look at it and see how it looks to you. See if it looks good. Then inside here, we've got a similar swoop that then sort of dies over onto that side. I think it's sort of like that. There. And we've blocked out the front of our building. Let's add a few other things. So we've got a horizon line. Let's do this part that's in the back. So remember that Carlos said in plan it looks like an X. So let's get that leg that's back there. It's going to be a little, the bottom of it will be below our horizon line. And then there's another curve like that. And if you need to start adjusting some of your lines while we're in pencil, now's a good time to do it. Then there's this part on the very far right where we can see the other part of that T, the X. And notice at the top of this section aligns with the midsection of the main building. And the bottom of it aligns with where you put this back here. And just come out a little. Yeah. And then we'll get to breaking it off. If you want to, now's a good time to pay attention to these ribs, the steel tubes that are inside. And notice that in this little section, there are two of them. See how they angle a bit? And then they start to really angle as they're sort of closer at the top and they're getting farther away as they help to shape that curved opening. And what's really wonderful about these ribs is it's helping in your sketch to show that the thing is turning. And then at this point, they start to straighten back up again. You can adjust them if you want to. You can erase some of them if you want to work on getting their spacing. I think it's easier to start at the rectangular ends and work towards the middle. So that's what I did. I erased mine and then went back and did a few. There we go. Okay, now let's put that middle rib in there, that horizontal one. So it goes horizontal a little bit and then it angles up. And due to foreshortening, we don't see it until it comes out the side here and then is horizontal again. In some ways, it doesn't make sense. It's helping to define what's going on. Let's get a couple of the other things around. I'd like to, I think this building off to the side is kind of important. So the bottom of the building is sort of we just see a little bit of the bottom of the building and the top is angled like that. And you'll be able to see a little bit of it through those shapes. I see the museum in the background. There's a little bit of wall that's right about at the center. It's angling off. It's sort of parallel to the top of our building. That's the eave line. There's a couple second lines. Slope the roof back. These lines are pretty close together. And then, if you want to, we're going to see some of this ornate stuff that is the platter-esque aspects of the museum. It's just, I think it's going to be a fun little addition to our sketch where we have something from a style from the 17 or 1800s, built in the early 1900s here in the park. And we have this rather futuristic looking building. It's a cool juxtaposition. Now we're going to be adding some people, as I'd said. We could add some of these blocks, but I'd like to keep it sketchy. Let me talk a little bit about when we're sketching people. One of the things you're going to notice is, for the most part, everybody's eye level, if you're just a normal height person, they're going to more or less line up with your eye level. You know, somebody's a little taller, their head will be a little higher than your eye level. Somebody who's shorter, they'll be a little below it. But in a sketch like this, if you make all the heads at the eye level, your eye level, and then it's where their feet are is determining how far or how close they are to you. So this person, we can see him in relationship to the building. This guy over here, we see him in relationship to the building, like that. Then these people inside, because they're farther away, they're going to be smaller. Their heads are still going to line up more or less, like that. We'll have some shade. If you wanted to do those cubes in this in there, you could. The important thing would be getting the scale of them correct because they're small little cubes to sit on. And then I think adding the trees is going to be nice as a way of pushing the building forward and giving some depth to our sketch. Now, in looking at this, it almost looks like my proportions aren't quite. If you wanted to stretch your building out a little, it feels like my building's a little squat or not quite long enough. I'm just going to add another bay. And now if everything is good with your underdrawing, let's get started with the inking. For this next part, I've got a pen, Precise B5. I've also got some fountain pens that would be cool to use, but I'm going to use the pen that we often use. I'm going to lighten some of these lines, pencil lines. Not so light that I can't see what I'm doing, but I want to lighten them a bit. All right, let's go back in and start with where we start, not unlike how we started the sketch originally. I'm outlining the shape. I'm adjusting. See how on the side here, the top slopes down and the bottom slopes back like that? That helps show that the building that you're looking at is in 3D. It's sloping back. That end is in perspective. When I do the floor, the bottom of the structure, I'm not going all the way through. I want to leave room for this little guy. Okay, I've got the two bottoms. I can trace my pencil lines. If there's any adjustments I want to make to this curving part, this part's sort of S-like, and then this is just a curve. And do the inside lip on that as well. That's that cool, called it ticker tape, but it's flexible LED panels. And instead of the exchange rate in pesos to dollars, there's poetry submitted by Tijuana and San Diego poets. Now I'll lightly do the leg that's in the back and this part here that we see on the far right sticking out. There's a little angled thing that's kind of cool. It's like a cornerstone on a traditional building. There's all sorts of information about the building. Now there's a block in the foreground, and I'm going to go ahead and add it there. And make some hints at our horizon line. And then why don't we start adding some of the things beyond, just to block out. Make a dash line on the roof there through the building. Profile of our roof here. Breaking up those lines. And then let's have some fun with the curly cues of the plateresque architecture there. You can see there's like a cool, almost like a crown. Anyway, it's peeking out from the back of this. We want to add some of that detail, but we don't want it to take over because it's beyond. I think that's enough. Why don't we start adding some of these ribs? And I'd like us to do them series of dashed lines, dashed and dots. So there's the frame around the entire portion. A series of dash and dots is all you want to do. And the reason is they're not in the foreground. That's not the first material that's presenting itself. That polycarbonate, the orange panels are in the way, and so we're not really seeing them. We're seeing them through something. And so this will help enforce that idea that there's something in front. And then when we get, hopefully you have a colored pencil, an orange colored pencil. because that we're going to have some fun really making this thing glow. And don't want to put our lines over our little guy, but we've got them how they're sloping now, working their way around the arched opening. And then as they come towards us, they're angling again. Until they're nearly straight. Hopefully you can go to Balboa Park before they take the pavilion down. We've even got ribbing in the back. They're even closer together. Probably the same spacing as that which is in the front. It's just because it's farther back, they appear a little closer together. I like that. Now, here's an interesting thing. These you can make as continuous lines because we are seeing the steel tubing. When you're inside of this, the polycarbonate is on the outside, and so we're seeing the inside. And actually, that's why these could be lines, straight lines together like that, because we are seeing them, and the polycarbonate is in the background. But they still want to be sort of light lines. They don't want to be your heaviest lines because they're so far away. Okay, so how about some people then? We'll start with this guy. His upper body is just, I usually put a little round top and make him a rectangle. And then I'd have some legs. These pokes underneath here, it's so dark I can hardly see them, so I'm just going to make a circle, break his body into two, like that. You could make their torsos in little triangles. And then this fellow, same thing. Got a little circle and little triangle. I mean, two little legs like that. There's some horizontal lines in here, which is all this shadow, ground plane. If you wanted to make a light line that's for this faux grass. Now what next to block out? Let's block out some trees. I'm just going to make a series of blobs, and then I'm gonna shade it all in. But I love those trees. It's one of the things I like about this view, even when this building, when the pavilion isn't there. I love those eucalyptus trees and the way they're open, but also the way that they frame the corner of the buildings. All right, and then, so we're building this up. I'm going to add some horizontal lines. We're building it up. I'm not going into a lot of detail until I get most everything else in there. Like at any time, if I had to stop, the sketch is looking pretty good. It really needs some of these tonal values, it needs the darks, and we're going to do that next. And is there anything else we might want to add? Maybe see how you can see some of these diagonal lines in there. All sorts of things going on. If you wanted to make a few, some of these darker areas, if you wanted to shade anything in, do it with a series of flicks, because see how you can really see when something is sort of showing through there, it's showing through as these series of lines like that. And it's the same that we're going to do over here. We're going to See how you got this really dark area that you're seeing through there? Let's get some of these diagonal lines going. Because I want to put this whole building behind here in shadow. There's a series of columns. But I'm going to go through and make all of these things in shadow. Where I talked about wanting to punch the building forward by making a lot of things in the background darker. Same with the trees. I think I'll do the trees not as diagonal lines, but as a series of horizontal lines. You can do them as a series of squiggles. Curly Q squiggles is how I often do them, but I want to, I think I'm just I get a little lighter as I go up. There's some darker areas in the middle. You're doing trees. So I'm doing some of my darkest areas right against the building, and then just keeping them as a random and not so random series of blobs. That's really how these eucalyptus are. If you wanted to put in any branches in there, there, like that. At least I think I'm okay. I might do a few diagonal lines on the roof to show which direction it's going. Let's see, I want to make sure I have my roof there. I'm doing a series of dots at the end of those tiles, just because I know that they're little barrel tiles. I'm going to do a shadow line underneath there. That whole side is in shadow. This side over here, only a part of it is in shadow. But do those super quick lines so that it doesn't get too important. It's just stuff that's happening. Okay, add a little detail there. Why don't we start focusing now on the building and add a few darks and then some of these shaded areas here. I'm making, I mean, you could put some lettering in where the ticker tape is, but I'm just going to make it, dark because it is dark. And I'm making my lines, see how I've made my lines try to go across the plane? And then to do this side, whichever way. Ideally, I would go horizontally across. If I'm in a hurry, I'm going to fill it in whichever which way I can. That works the fastest. You might want to consider turning your sketchbook to make those lines go easier. I try not to move my sketchbook just for the sake of the sketch tutorial. If you, like I said, if you could get any letters in there, pick a word. You could write exchange, you could write poetry, you could write whatever word you'd like. Write the word pavilion. If you could keep them horizontal though, and angling up a little bit, it kind of gives a hint that that's the way that building is. But how's it looking so far to you? I think it would be fine at any point to come in and add some of the, I think we could get into adding the orange at this point. Before we add the orange, Let's darken in. There's a band of trees behind here, and it actually is really helping to define the arch. So if you'll just shade it in underneath the arch like that, you see it? It's less about wanting to put the trees in there and more about wanting to help shape the curved form. There, like that. And there is a little shadow on the face, this right here on the ground. So make those horizontal lines. And then underneath the pavilion itself, there is a shadow, and just make it a series of horizontal lines in there, working around the people. See how that helps to bring our building down. Don't see very many shadows in the back here, so the sun must have really been up that day. Looked like it was, the sun is coming from that direction. So anything that you want to add shadows to, you put them on the below the object and to the right of the object. If you wanted to add that tree in there, you could. All right, why don't we get to our colors? Now's a good time to lighten up any pencil lines. All right, let's go to the orange. So first I'd like you to lightly just tone in the entire thing. Keep it light. Go with the direction of the corrugated panels. That is, just follow the steel tubes. Turn your sketchbook if it makes it easier, especially this middle part where those lines are really angled. You can work from left to right, right to left, or both. Lightly do the part down that we see through there, and then let's get this guy. Just put the orange where the orange is. So since the orange is in the background, maybe don't shade over the steel. Okay, now we can start shading it in a little darker. So just in those areas where you see stuff behind, darken those up a bit. I'd like us to not tone over where the white steel tubes are. So you're going to be making sort of a grid here. And this extra layer is helping to define, what you're seeing through there. But it's also going in the direction of the corrugation, so that's helping it to read. And then you're going to go back and forth over this a couple of times just to where there's, make it really stand out. Now, and also you can go back, see down here, see how we really see some shadow through there if you wanted. That helps to give a hint at what's happening in there. See how that's on the ground? It's darker in the middle here, lighter where the light's reflecting here, lighter where the light's reflecting here, and then darker. So darkest on the ends and right in the middle. And that's where you just add more color. And then you can keep doing this, depending on how loose, how sketchy, or how defined you want it to be. And then anytime if you feel like you need more around the edges, if you made it too loose, too light, you can add that. See how it really comes together, and it's that color is just it's just so cool. And add a little more through there. Might add a few more lines through here. Just it's everything is sort of crowding together from that view. Everything is foreshortened. But these lines really help to turn the little pavilion. Then what else? I want to have some, we can add a little sky, maybe just some curvy lines like that. This is one of those rare times you'll see that I actually didn't put a box around it. You could put a rectangle around your sketch. We're at the Exchange Pavilion. I think it's important to include World Design Capital.